Hey guys, welcome back. Glad to have you. Week two is now in the books for the NFL, and I gotta say there was some pretty wild stuff that happened. I mean, who would have thought that the Saints would drop 40 points? Because I sure didn't do it, and they've been scoring nonstop. They shut down the Cowboys basically, which was kind of surprising. Um, Atlanta with the Philadelphia game, that was nuts. I mean, Saquon catches that ball, we're talking a whole different story, and the game's over basically. But he didn't. Falcons drove down the field, scored instantaneously, basically, and we had an upset. That was crazy. Minnesota upsetting San Francisco and is now 2-0. I'm sure a lot of people didn't see that coming. Probably not even Vikings fans because they know San Francisco's tough. They, I mean, or even the Ravens losing to Vegas, the Raiders. I mean, wasn't expecting them to be 0-2. I mean, Tennessee also with should have won that game against the Jets. Couple things didn't go their way. I mean, but that's what we're here for. It's the NFL. It's fun. It's awesome. It's like something different. It's like wow, didn't see that coming. But uh, yeah. So next, what we're gonna do is we're going to uh, go through the week two matchups, go through the weekly report, and then go through the power rankings and call it a day. So, with that being said, let's get started. Okay, time to go over the week two matchups here. For the first matchup, it looks like game over for you. Took down Big Papa 135.89 to 120.01. For Big Papa, Prescott at 13, lower than what the projected total was. Pacheco had a nice game before getting hurt, and that's unfortunate because he's going to be out for quite some time. Uh, Brian Robinson teed off on the Giants, doing pretty good. I was thinking Eckler would be taken to the role, but that's not the case. He is clearly the guy, and um, it's going to be a good one going down the road. Tyreek Hill kind of underperformed. Uh, should have had a lot higher points in my opinion, but hey, that's part of it. I mean, Tua was out too. I mean, with the concussion, and poor guy. I hope he's all right. You hate to see it, you do. And the ironic thing is, he was tackled by Damar Hamlin. So, but it sounded like he wanted to lead and take charge. And fortunately, that diving headbutt was not it. So, um, but just prayers for him. Hopefully, everything's going to be okay. I know he's going to be put on IR, or if he hasn't done it already, but maybe he can get some time to think about some stuff. I know he's not retiring. Please don't retire. But either way, Chris Olave kind of took a. I mean, he improved this game. He had a nice bounce back game, but even though under projections still lower. Pratt Firemuth had a nice solid game, 4 for 39 yards. I mean, but the other tight end caught the touchdown. Washington, I believe, caught the touchdown. So I mean, there's still some good amount, especially with Justin Fields starting. And then James Conner had himself a day against the Rams with 20 fantasy points, 122 yards, touchdown, and a reception here out the backfield. Uh, Jake Elliott had 7 points, should have had more. The field goal at the beginning of the thing, they should have kicked the field goal at the beginning, but decided to go for it instead. And then you looks like you got Buffalo here with 19.69 fantasy points. The defense was strong today. And then over on game over side, Mar Jackson was 17. A little less, but still pretty good for our league anyway. Brees Hall had himself a game with 24 fantasy points. Travis Etienne had him basically. This is a good amount, like 14.8. I would think he would get this every time, but it's all different. They've said they were going to cut back on his usage a little bit, and they have. But next is Mike Evans, 3 for 6, only 42 yards. They took away some of the deep ball work, so I could see why that being the case. And I figured it'd be a Chris Godwin game, which it was. But But yeah, no, I could think a bounce back game for sure. And then Rasheed Rice with 18.5 fantasy points. He was pretty strong at the last, like at the end of the season last year, like finishing as a, like from when they came back from the bye until the end of the season, he finished as the wide receiver 9. And he's still picking up right where he left off, especially the first game and now second game. He's the real deal. Haven't heard anything about like what his legal situation is, but I'm sure they'll keep us posted. Then Kittle had himself a game, 7 for 8, 76 and a touchdown, little 20 fantasy point alley, pretty dominant. Especially Debo's going to be out, so it could be Ayuk, could be Kittle, could be Mason that gets some extra work too. And then Jameson Williams, 14 fantasy points. Still kind of surprised me. I'm still a little hesitant, but it's nice to see that he's doing pretty well. Nice to see that he's doing pretty well. Just the hesitant is just, I mean, he hasn't been really good. It could be a Devontae Parker thing, where like he wasn't good for the first 2 games and then has this breakout year and then that's about it. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe, I mean, everyone's still excited about it. I'm not fully in on it yet. But either way, Chris Boswell had himself like 9 points, still pretty solid. Still kicking field goals against Denver's tough defense there. And then San Francisco here finished with 9 fantasy points, a little over 9 fantasy points. So next is Ricky Bobby taking on Unfinished Business, which they ended up beating 125.07 or 120.58. This one came down to the last game of the night, where projected wise, Unfinished Business was projected to win by a couple points, but fortunately, Bijan Robinson took over and Yabwe Koo got his stick in. But looking at it here, kind of underperformed. Like Stafford, not used to Stafford, especially with Arizona. Like Stafford should have had a better game. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. They've done it with Cooper Kupp in the lineup before, and even without Cooper Kupp, he's still pretty solid. Against the Cardinals. Kyren Williams had himself a good game, about 15 points, about average. James Cook, finally, we get to see James Cook go off today. Let him cook. No pun intended. No, just kidding. It's pun intended. 3 touchdowns. Basically, got his receiving touch or his total touchdowns, basically, like from last year. But we'll see. I don't know if that's going to be a consistent thing, but we'll see how that goes down the road. St. Brown had himself a better game today. 11 receptions, 119 yards. Pretty dominant. Deebo Samuel finished with 19 points, but unfortunately he's going to be out for a little bit. But hopefully everything's not too serious in that. Still a pretty solid game. 8 receptions, 110 yards, a couple carries here and there. Evan Ingram pulled his hammy and was out of the game basically during warm-ups. He was going to be out. So looks like he had Taysom Hill on his bench, some upside there, but unfortunately only 2.9 points. Only 2.9 points. Deontay Johnson, 4.5 points. Kind of underperforming in that one, but there is a new quarterback and change for those that saw. I mean, Bryce Young has been benched for Andy Dalton. Could be good for fantasy for Deontay Johnson, I would think, just because he would throw like Dalton. I mean, when he has number 1 receivers, like he throws to the number 1 receivers. So, like in this case, like even like AJ Green, Michael Thomas, like stuff like that. So I could see like Deontay Johnson maybe taking a little bit bigger in fantasy, but and then Myers still doing his thing, 12 fantasy points with an undefeated Seattle team. That one's interesting too. And that game going into overtime was nuts. But and then the Chargers, basically everyone playing against Carolina. He has stream defenses against Carolina. He had the Chargers this week and put up about 12 points. So pretty solid on that one. Over for Ricky Bobby. Joe Burrow seemed like, for fantasy-wise, seemed like himself. Bijan with 19.22 fantasy points. Bijan Robinson with 16.2 fantasy points here. Started picking up later on in the game. And then Devon Achane, basically when Tua went out, he started getting a lot more work, but he still did pretty good. I mean, 96 yards and 7 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown. Um, and they're probably going to have to go to him again. Like, yeah, they're probably going to have a tough matchup this week, but I mean, the volume should still be a lot for him. Then Michael Pittman, kind of on downplay. I mean, yeah, 7 receptions, like 3 for 21. I mean, the Packers defense is okay, but I mean, I thought he was safe a little bit because usually, like, it didn't matter like who it was. Like, even with Anthony Richardson, he was still getting double-digit fantasy points. So, but we'll see. We'll see when they figure it out. I mean, Josh Downs is coming back, so maybe that might help Pittman in the long run. And then Cooper Kupp, I mean, 7.7 points. Fortunately, he got hurt again, and fortunately wasn't able to finish the game. That's unfortunate. It sounds like he's going to miss a good extended period of time. Hopefully everything's okay with that situation. Rams can't catch a break right now. Then Brock Bowers, 18.8 fantasy points. He's the tight end one. 9 receptions, 98 yards. It sounds like with this, they are looking to get him the ball. Like, it's Devontae Adams and him. And Jacoby Myers is sort of being weaned out of the offense a little bit. Tank Dell, only 2.3 fantasy points. That's unfortunate. But, I mean, it was Stephon Diggs the first week, Nico Collins the second week. Who knows? It could be Tank Dell the third week. But we'll see on that one. Younghoe Koo ended up finishing with 10 points. He got his stuff. And then Houston's defense played pretty solid, getting 16.25 fantasy points. Garrett and the Jets defeated Hurts 122.21 to 89.05. For Hurts, he had 25.82 points, pretty solid there. It's even without AJ Brown, he still was doing good. Derrick Henry had a pretty solid game, little bounce back here. 16.6 fantasy points here. I did like when they ran the goal line, putting him in the wildcat basically, and just punching it in the end zone. That was pretty cool. And David Montgomery, 17 fantasy points. He's basically going to get a touchdown weekly. That's how I see it. And it's hard to stop Detroit's running game. They have a two-headed monster back there. Jamar Chase, 4 for 35, so 7.5 points. Not bad. I mean, Kansas City's defense is tough, but you think with T. Higgins out, there should have been a lot more in this situation. Stephon Diggs kind of quietly came back down here. This is what I figured Stephon Diggs would be around, like 7 to 10 points. But then again, who knows? Everything could be changed. I mean, he can end up having bigger games and things. A 4 for 37 is not bad. Parkinson, usually Njoku still being out. Njoku was going to be out, so he put in Parkinson in this case. Parkinson had a good game last week. Think that would be the same again, especially with like the receiver injuries, but unfortunately that was not the case. Pickens had himself not so great, but then again it's Denver's defense. I'm not worried. I think he'll have a bounce back game. And then Jason Sanders, kind of hard with Tua being out, couldn't get the stuff that he needed. 4 points here, and then Miami's defense basically collapsed, and only 3 fantasy points. Then meanwhile for Garrett, Allen, only 11.76. They still had a pretty good blowout game, so he didn't really need to throw the ball or run the ball in for a touchdown. That was basically Cook's game. So, I mean, I don't expect to see this on a regular basis. And then White got hurt as well, only 3.3 fantasy points, 10 for 18 with 1 reception, 5 yards. Not really the greatest. I mean, I'm looking at Bucky Irving already in this case, but we'll see what happens with him. Mason still pretty solid, 18.4 fantasy points, 100 yards rushing, 1 touchdown with the reception for 4 yards. Still going to be RB1 basically until Christian McCaffrey gets back. Flowers here with 22.10 fantasy points. He's the real deal. I mean, I was thinking like I was high in him throughout the season, throughout the off season. Cooled down a little bit just because like okay maybe I just like the schedule's kind of hard, but we'll see on we'll see how it goes, you know. Um, but also Mark Andrews coming back a little bit that might take into some of it. And but if that's not the case, we've had 2 games. I mean that's not the case. He's been targeted a lot. Um, so I mean, it's good for him. It's awesome. Garrett Wilson, another mediocre. Like he still got 10 fantasy points. His floor is at least in the double digits, so that's fine. I mean, 4 for 57, and 1 carry for 5 yards. It's not bad. And then McBride going off for 18.7 fantasy points, 18.7 fantasy points, 6 for 67, and getting the touchdown on that fumble recovery in the end zone. Um, so Marvin Harrison took over for the first part of it, so you didn't really see him much. But then once they put a game plan to try to stop him, then McBride was the guy following that. Pollard, 15 fantasy points. Pollard's basically the guy, and especially with what's his face getting hurt, Spears getting hurt, um, it still didn't matter. It's not like a 50-50. It's more like a 70-30 or 65-35. But still, the pull, like you see him pull the guards and follow behind those guys, like he gets big gains off that. So, but is it going to be like a consistent time of 15 around there? I don't think it will. Maybe he might have some gains where it's like single digits, but right now it's looking pretty solid. Uh, Dicker the kicker here with 9 fantasy points here, a couple field goals, and missed the 1 extra point. Could have had himself 11 points here, but and then the Jets still did pretty well here, 13.55 fantasy points. Okay. Saquon defeated Witch Nasty 142.50 to 134.44. This was my game of the week. And going into the final game yesterday, both projections were tied at 136. So I was like, okay, this is going to go down to the wire here. CJ Stroud had himself 13 fantasy points. Saquon Barkley did his thing with 17 fantasy points. That's poor guy. Dropped the catch. Could have had more, but the catch for the first down he dropped. He also, I think, was stopped at the 1 yard line. He was stopped at the 1 yard line, I believe. His forearm was at the 1. So, and which Hurts ended up getting the touchdown. So, I mean, that could have been a massive, like, 20-something point fantasy day. And then Josh Jacobs, basically, like, you want to run the ball like on the Colts, that's basically what you do. And did not expect him to get 32 carries for 151 yards. Could have had I think, a touchdown too, but he ended up fumbling the football. So, but still had a pretty great game here. And I see probably them doing it again. Unfortunately, they're going to have a much tougher run defense with the Titans right now. Devontae Smith taking over for A.J. Brown while he's out, becoming the focal point here. 7 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. Pretty solid for 20.6 fantasy points. Not bad. Chris Godwin had himself a day. Always like over the middle. They Lions take away the deep ball, force you to beat them in front of you. And Chris Godwin had himself a game, 7 for 117 and a touchdown. Mark Andrews, bounce back game, about 10 fantasy points. I mean, a little over 9 fantasy points, still not bad. 4 for 51. J.K. Dobbins, dominating still. 17 for 131 and a touchdown, plus a reception for 21 fantasy points. Sounds like he's still going to be the guy. Now, the question I'm like curious, and it's like, okay, are you going to keep doing it like this with him? Because I know like there's bound to be that injury lurking around in case he gets hurt again. But Butker here had 9 fantasy points, a few field goals here and there, a couple extra points. And then Baltimore's defense finished with 11 fantasy points as well. Meanwhile, for Witch Nasty side, Anthony Richardson finished with 13, few interceptions, kind of hurt towards the end. Mixon here with 8 fantasy points, got hurt. Kind of got hurt on that hip drop tackle. Didn't really play much after that. Otherwise, he was on his way to a good one. Chuba Hubbard had himself like a solid game here, 64 rushing yards, four receptions for 12 yards as well for 11.6 fantasy points. CeeDee Lamb finished with 19 fantasy points, 4 for 90 and touchdown. That's pretty good. Davante Adams, welcome back. We missed you. 27 fantasy points, 9 for 110 and a touchdown. So Sam Laporta here, 2 for 13 for 3.3 fantasy points, kind of underperformed. Projection I thought was a little too high to begin with. I know, like, especially with rookie tight ends, if you have like a good thing, they tend to regress in the second season. So, but I didn't think it'd be this bad. But then again, we'll see how it comes up here. We'll see how it comes up here. They could have a game plan for both receivers, and it's like, okay, Laporta, your turn. Let's see. And then Malik Neighbors had himself a game. This is the game that they were looking for. 10 for 127 and a touchdown. He was always open. I mean, 18 targets is quite a lot here. I haven't seen that much since, like, Daniel Jones wanted to keep targeting Darren Waller during practice, and they had to take him off the field because he wouldn't stop throwing to him. But especially it was a horrible run defense. That's why I did a little free DraftKings thing and I chose Neighbors here because his price was cheap, so I was like, I got to do this. I got to take advantage of this because he was going to go off. Aubrey, surprisingly, after the blowout fashion, he still finished with 17 fantasy points, 4 field goals, and an extra point here. And then Philly only had about 5 fantasy points here against the Atlanta here. So, and then make America great again here. Beat Grady Fly for a fight guy, 125.88 to 95.66. Pat Mahomes with about 17 fantasy points, pretty like in a tough matchups against Cincinnati. His lowest passing yards, I think, or second lowest in his career, something like that. Which he'll have a bounce back game. It's fine. Jonathan Taylor ran a lot here, and he didn't really play. It's just me, or did he really not play much of the fourth quarter? Was that just me? Probably not, but like 16.5 fantasy points. Could have had more. And then, holy smokes, Alvin Kamara, 45 points. 4 touchdowns basically on the day. 45 fantasy points. That is a lot. It's probably the highest of the season. Something like that. Brandon Cooks, only 3 fantasy points here. Think he would have taken a big step forward, especially with Ferguson being out. Cooper kind of underperformed, 3 for 11 yards. I mean, they got to do something with that offense. Something's got to give because not all is well in Cleveland. And then this one was supposed to be Jake Ferguson, but unfortunately he was ruled out for the game. And Cade Otton was put in his place. Negative 1 carry for negative 4 yards. I think it was just a toss back after the one dude was about to get sacked. After Baker was about to get sacked, and just tossed it to him. But I figured it'd be a red zone target here and there. And that would have probably got back with 6 points, but unfortunately that's not the case. And then Calvin Ridley had himself a nice one, like carry for 10 yards and a touchdown, and then 4 for 77 and a touchdown. And I still don't know how he caught that ball in the end zone. I thought that was picked. I'm like, but Will Levis fit it in between, and Ridley rolled in to the end zone untouched. It's like, cool. Tucker finished with 12 points, pretty solid. Missed a field goal though. That was kind of interesting here. Missed a field goal. And then Dallas was unexpected. It's not expecting the Saints to score 44. 3.4 fantasy points here. And then 4, Grady Fly. Herbert had 16, pretty normal in that area. Questionable here. Austin Eckler had himself a nice game too. I mean, 8 for 38 is not bad, and 3 receptions for 47 yards, pretty good too. Swift did not have a good rushing game. Houston's defense smothered him up. But 4 for 24 ain't bad too. I mean, 8.2 fantasy points, nothing to sneeze at. Justin Jefferson, I mean, 4 for 133 to touchdown. The little juke he had, or the little cutback he had, was nice on that 97-yard touchdown. 24.3 fantasy points. It's kind of nice, but he's dealing with a quad issue, but it shouldn't affect it too much. And what I hear, he's gonna play this Sunday, but I don't know. I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything until the reports come out. So Brandon Ayuk, only 8.3 fantasy points, got a little bit more action in this one, 4 for 43. He's gonna have to step up next game if they decide to do it that way, but it shouldn't be a problem if they do. Um, with Devo being out and all that, and then Christian McCaffrey being out and all that. Um, and then Travis Kelce, I mean, he had that one big play that got called back. So, I mean, which would have gave him a little bit more fantasy points, but one for 5 yards. I knew they were going to cut back on his thing. That's why I was trying to avoid him, but I didn't think it'd be this bad. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in the upcoming weeks. Maybe that'll be a little bit better. Tyler Lockett, after the big game last week, it wasn't his time this week, 2 for 15 yards. McPherson had himself a good game, 15 fantasy points, but of course that missed extra point hurt. That game would have went into overtime. Who knows? He may have gotten a field goal out of it or something. So, and then the Colts defense, don't blame that situation at all. I mean, Green Bay, you don't know what Malik Willis can do. Hasn't played pretty well, hasn't played very well in his previous starts. So, I mean, Colts would have been a nice play. They only got 7.26 fantasy points. And then the last matchup in the evening, the closest matchup of the evening, Team Bird Abides takes down Hawk Pockets 145.73 to 143.22. And this one was really good. I mean, Kyler Murray with 33 points. I mean, Marvin Harrison down here, you could see with 30 points. I mean, basically, majority of that in the first half for Marvin Harrison. Gibbs with 17.6. He had a pretty solid game. A lot of catches out the backfield. Ford didn't get many of his receptions. Still, I mean, 7 for 64 yards. Pretty good yards per carry there. Jalen Waddle, 8.5 fantasy points, 4 for 41. Didn't really do much after Tua went out. Kyle Pitts, 3 for 20, only 5 fantasy points. DJ Moore, 6 for 53, 11.3 fantasy points. Fairbairn with the 20-pointer here. A lot of field goals for him this evening and an extra point. And then Pittsburgh's defense, still pretty solid with 12 fantasy points here. Meanwhile, for Hawk Pockets, Janie Daniels didn't really get any touchdowns today, but still 226 passing yards and 10 carries, 44. It's still pretty good. He got sacked a lot, though. And then Zach Charbonnet. So usually Christian McCaffrey's here, but Christian McCaffrey's out. Zach Charbonnet got put in due to Ken Walker being out, and he had a pretty solid game, and it seems like that might be the case again. Zach Charbonnet may go for round 2, 17.9 fantasy points, 38 yards, touchdown, 5 for 31. Nice. And then Ramondre Stevenson, 21 carries, 81 yards, about 4 yards a carry there for a touchdown, then 2 receptions for 9 yards. Still, they run the ball very well. We'll just say that. He's basically their best player, and they're running it through him, basically. Drake London had himself a bounce-back game, 6 for 54 and a touchdown. Cousins was looking his way. Nico Collins is the number one receiver for the Texans. 28.5 fantasy points, basically doubled his projection. 8 for 135 and a touchdown. Nice. Dalton Kincaid, 4 for 33, kind of underperformed a little bit, but, I mean, it's still pretty solid. But, I mean, they didn't pass as much just because Cook was having a game, and they were blowing him out. DK Metcalf having himself a game with 29.9 fantasy points here, 10 for 129 and a touchdown. Jake Booty, only 5 fantasy points here, kind of an underperforming game. And then the Browns defense, still 11.78 fantasy points here in this situation. Oh, excuse me. Let's see. Next, we'll go into the weekly report. So I can see for here, the best scoring team was Birds of Bites with 145.73 fantasy points. The worst scoring team was Hertz with 89.05. And on here, you can't see the quarterback position here, but it was Kyler Murray, I believe, with 33 fantasy points. Um, Alvin Kamara was the running back that had the best starter performance, which was 45. Marvin Harrison for the receivers was 30. Kittle for the tight ends was 20.6. Fairbairn for kicking was 20. And for defense, it was Buffalo at 19.69. Bench warmers of the week. You had Aaron Rodgers that was on the bench for 17 points. Devin Singletary was on the bench for 15.5 fantasy points. JSN had 24.7 fantasy points, and Hunter Henry, the tight end, had 19.9 fantasy points. Next for the awards here. The most efficient manager goes to Saquon this week with 142.5 points out of a possible 142.5 points. It's 100%. Least efficient manager, which I find hilarious here. The highest score was also the least efficient, which was funny. 145.73 out of a max of 176.83. Highest points in a loss was Hawk Pockets in his loss to Bird Abides. He had 143.22 points, and he lost by a couple points. The lowest points in a win and the biggest blowout go to Garrett and the Jets, who defeated Hurts 122.21 to 89.05, basically. And then for the narrow victory, of course, it had to be Birds Abides against winning by a couple points over Hawk Pockets. Overachiever in this, which means that the starter projection, they outscore it by heavily. Basically around 34 points goes to Hawk Pockets here. And then for the underachiever, under the starting points, goes to Hurts as well. And then here's the performances here. Performances just showing that it goes by the high score first, and then goes lowest score here. The gold there means that's your points that you scored in the game, and the clear and the grayish means that's a maximum of points that you could have scored it there. So if you wanted, you could pause the video, take a look at it, and go from there. So okay, and then here is the standings. Let's just update the standings here real quick. Game over for you is 2-0, followed by excuse me here, followed by Ricky Bobby at 1-1, and Unfinished Business at 0-2. Here for next division is Birds Abides is 2-0, followed by Hawk Pockets and Baddest Goat at 0-2. Next is Saquon is 2-0, followed by Witch Nasty and Amarika at 1-1. And then the last division here, Garrett and the Jets are 2-0, followed by Hertz at 1-1, and Big Papa at 0-2. So I took all the standings, basically took their points for, points scored, threw it all together in this little formula, and it generated a score. This score is, and this is your power ranking score. So without further ado, let's take a look. So in this case, leading the power rankings this week for week 3 is Garrett and the Jets with 1.56. Now the parentheses, he was with the tie for game over for you, but with his parentheses is the score that he actually got, which was 1.652, and game over for you had 1.560. Now you notice that there's some brackets next to, like for Garrett and Jets, there's a bracket next to his with a +2. What does that mean? Oh, that means that it was, it goes off by last week where you were previously. So in this case, Garrett and the Jets were third on the power rankings last week. They moved up 2 spots to get the first spot. Game over for you moved down 1. Next is Bird Abides with 1.53. His score of 1.532 went down from second spot in the power rankings. Saquon also had 1.53, but his was 1.529. With 0, he didn't move anywhere. He stayed in 4th compared to last week. Now this is where we have the biggest jump of the evening, which was Amarika, which had a 1.01 score, jumped 4 spots from 9th position. I had to double check my work just to make sure I was doing the power rankings correctly, and it was. So he took the biggest jump of the night. Witch Nasty had a 1.00, dropped down 1 from his 5th spot last week. Ricky Bobby jumped from the 10th spot to the 7th spot here with 0.98 for the score, followed by Hertz right behind him with 0.97, dropped a couple spots from 6 to 8. Hawk Pockets then was there in the 9th spot with 0.49. He dropped down a spot from 8 to 9. Big Papa had the biggest jump downward from he had 0.48, dropped 3 spots from 7th to 10th. Then Unfinished Business had 0.45, and with going up 1 spot here. Excuse me here, sorry about that. Going up 1 spot from 11th, and Gritty Fly at 12, Gritty Fly for Vikai 0.03 or 0.043, going from 11th to 12th in this spot. And last but not least here, just going over the matchups for this week. Garrett and the Jets is going to take on Big Papa. Game Over for You is taking on Ricky Bobby. Hertz taking on Unfinished Business. Amarika taking on Witch Nasty. Birded Bites taking on Saquon. Gritty Fly taking on Hawk Pockets. If I had to choose a game of the week for this week, it will be Ricky Bobby versus Game Over for You. I feel like in this matchup, like Game Over for You is going to get a lot of points, but I feel like that Ricky Bobby in this case is going to be an underrated, getting a lot of points. The matchups seem fine. If things go well for Houston, I mean, go into pattern. I mean, first it was Stephon Diggs, then it's Nico Collins. Could be Tank Dell in this one. But yeah, I think this one could be This one could be an exciting game too. But there's some good ones. There's some good matchups here. So, but yeah, that's all I had for today. Appreciate you taking time to watch the video. If you would like to, leave a like, subscribe. I mean, go for it. It kind of helps the channel out a little bit. That being said, I'm going to get out of here. To my guys, good luck, and may the odds ever be in your favor. And then for everyone else here, hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.